I'm going to point out, if you're one of those people that has the pet peeve where you don't like the movie cover of a book, you want the Penguin original version, you might want to pick up the book soon before the movie comes out. Alright, and welcome to the CodeX Cantina. I am Una, no crypto today. One of the selections that I had for February is Passing by Nella Larsen, written in 1929. A very interesting piece to go along with my other selections for Black History Month. We selected Go Down Moses by William Faulkner, which has to deal with miscegenation, as well as On the Come Up, which was actually kind of a difficult read for me to get through. And what I'm going to do is kind of try and tie those two together. I'm going to do the Passing by itself, and I'm also going to do this as a fireside chat, so it's going to be a little bit more casual, where I won't go into as much analytical detail as I usually do. Maybe that's a plus for some of you. If you're new to this channel, we do literature breakdowns all the time, going into heavy detail about what all the different pieces mean and try to explain perhaps what the author was going through. Please subscribe. So why I chose this. Racial passing is something that's very interesting. Racial passing is when a minority individual tries to pass as what would be the majority race of a region. Particularly the Jim Crow era, it became more difficult to just look at visually at someone and understand, but racial identity is still very important for a lot of individuals today, as well as double consciousness. When you struggle with the idea of how you react in one way and react in the other, and are torn between sides, kind of like how what you saw in the original Angie Thomas novel, The Hate You Give, you see a little bit how that could tear an individual down, that you almost kind of need to really have a strong sense of self in today's age. I wanted to really kind of explore that with this month's selections. You've got people that refuse to pass. They're light-skinned enough that you wouldn't know whether they had black heritage in them or they were 100% white. In the Jim Crow era, particularly with how racist a lot of America could be, particularly in the South, if you had even just an ounce of black in your body, you were considered a black person as opposed to a white person. And also, I want to point out in this text, you'll see the Negro word. Black and the usage of the N-word flipped kind of during the civil rights era, where the N-word was more like acceptable back then. And you saying the word black back then was really offensive. So it kind of flipped. If you're kind of curious as to why they just dropped those words in this book, first of all, I kind of wanted to point that out. But when some people refuse to pass, they kind of embrace their own racial identity. Some pass only when it's convenient, and some try to completely repudiate their racial background and try to pass permanently as a part of the dominant race, the white culture, in this book. So my initial reactions is I absolutely loved this book. I thought it was a really enjoyable read. There were some scenes that were just so vivid. I want to compare it to Inglourious Bastards. There are some scenes there in the basement or in the opening scene with Christopher Waltz. You get that level of intensity in the first kind of major plot point, which I kind of want to cover a little bit today, because that brought out a lot about how to view the rest of this book. If you're a younger reader and you're looking at this book, you may not have all the tools, and I kind of want to supply you with maybe a couple of that maybe open your eyes a little bit to that. In the beginning, you're kind of just looking at characters. What does this character want? What does this character think? And I think Nella Larsen did a really good job with this book, with making it so that the characters represent themes through this. And you think about what this theme means to this theme, it makes a lot more sense, at least to me. And what's interesting is I couldn't believe that this wasn't a movie, with how moving some of the scenes were. And my wife actually explained, like, she looked up when I kind of was telling her how much I enjoyed this book. She looked it up. There apparently is a movie coming out on this. So it will be with Tessa Thompson, a beautiful woman to be portraying Claire. What a great casting. But I'm going to point out, if you're one of those people that has the pet peeve where you don't like the movie cover of a book, you want the Penguin original version, you might want to pick up the book soon before the movie comes out, because I imagine once the movie comes out, you're just going to have Tessa Thompson all over your cover, which ain't a bad thing if you ask me. But I digress. This book kind of takes place in the Roaring 20s, okay? So Jim Crow laws. I don't know if this is in the intro. I always skip the intro, and I just start with the actual writings from the author. But the Jim Crow laws were in effect here. Things were not equal. The black community was not allowed to use a lot of the services that the white community did. This was segregation era. That's what's going on here. So a warning is, I don't consider this information, what I'm about to give you, as spoiler information. I do think that characters are more important than specific plot devices. So maybe just stop this video here if you're like, a die-hard spoiler person, but I want to give you some tools that allow you to potentially interpret this piece. Why does Irene struggle with trying to use cabs? Why was she so nervous going to this fancy restaurant in the beginning? It's because in her blood she had some black heritage, which means any black heritage, some whites considered you 100% black at that point in time and viewed you as a lesser person. Horrible, I know, right? So if she were discovered, she would potentially be kicked out of using what would be considered, in terms of, in this era of segregation, a white-only service or community aspect. So as she's passing, as Irene struggles with using the cab and has all these fears as she's in this restaurant, someone recognizes her and she starts to fear that she'll be ousted as passing. So you'll notice at this point, Irene is passing. In your mind, Irene thinks it's okay to pass at this point in time, right? What she learns is this person that discovers her is her old childhood friend, Claire, who was also passing. And what we learn is, so Claire kind of invites her, Irene, to go to her party later on. And this is kind of the first major plot point, which you realize is like a trapped plot point for Claire, is that her husband doesn't even know she's passing. Her husband is white and doesn't know that Claire has some black background in her racial identity. And this part where they're meeting the husband and you find out that the raisman is blatantly racist, this sets up the themes for the rest of the book. So I'm going to go up to, like I said, I'm going to go up to the first plot point here. This isn't a spoiler from my view because this is in the first 25% of the book. But if you're like, hey, I want to know nothing and I'm in, you might want to skip ahead at this point in time. But what this scene does is this sets up the themes. You've got Irene, who's kind of trying to play the middle ground. She passes only when it's convenient, when she needs to use that cab or when she wants the tea at the Drayton. She will pass to get in. So she plays both sides, right? Then you got Claire, who's permanently passing. She's playing a very dangerous game with a community that doesn't want her there, and she's trying to pass as them from a racial identity perspective. And then you got Brian, her husband, who's like, I accept what I am. I am proud of being a black person, and he doesn't pass. And then you have the character Jack Ballou, who is unbelievably racist. He's the guy that you don't want at your party because he's not a cool dude to hang out with. He's actually a guy that probably needs a stern talking to. So instead of thinking these characters as characters through the rest of this book, think of them as the themes of what they represent. So many of the discussions between the characters through the rest of this book pull out those themes, right? So you have the character, Irene, who sometimes passes, sometimes doesn't. There are LGBTQ commentaries here from, did girls actually flirt with each other here? Think about it from a racial identity standpoint of, would the girl that passes sometimes and not have a relationship both with the girl that permanently passes and a guy that never passes, right? Think about the racial identity of John Ballou being the pure racist. Could he ever accept someone who wasn't truly part of his race? Think about those themes as you read through this book, and you might enjoy this piece as much as I did with how Nella Larsen explored racial identity and this double consciousness of when you feel torn between who am I and where do I belong, the way that Irene judges other people. She has this Zulina servant that is in a different class and doesn't even think twice about how she uses her. What a wonderful piece to kind of explore the era, the mentality, the racism that was happening at the time. So overall, while I truly enjoy it, I gotta call out issues when I see them. The interrupters and parentheticals are insane. The way that she just constantly interrupts a sentence. I don't understand why she just doesn't use a more active voice and stops using all these parentheticals where they're not needed, because a parenthetical will really break how I read and the pace at which I'm understanding a concept. That did bring it down. So this is not going to be a perfect book because I feel like there were just some straight technical issues in the writing. With that said, the concepts and themes that are explored are absolutely brilliant and what allows this piece to be carried through for me as a reader. So overall, I'm very glad I picked this piece for the February theme. I'm very excited that I read it before the movie. I'm kind of excited to see who else gets cast in this movie. Maybe we'll do a more detailed breakdown before we go into it, but hopefully I kind of give you some themes there to think about. So I didn't go into as much detail as usual with this. I know, like I said, this is supposed to be kind of like a newer series of Fireside Chat, which is supposed to be just very quick, very casual. Let us know what you thought about this in the thoughts below. If you did want more information or if you thought this was the right level of extrapolation or do I need to pull back even further, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this book. I was very energized and very excited about it, and I cannot wait to check out this movie when it comes out in the theaters. Guys, please consider subscribing for more literary discussions in the future. Una out.